very first episode of the Get Psyched show. My name is George, and in this episode, I am joined by Misha Botting. Misha is a sports psychologist and currently leads the Sport Psychology department within the Institute of Sport at Sport Scotland. With around 20 years of experience across a range of sports, we look at what you can do to involve mental training in your week. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and if so, please be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. Thanks and enjoy. Hi Misha, how are you?
I'm doing very well, George. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for joining me today. So Misha, could you give me sort of an overview of your career path, and where you're working now as well?
My career path started in the Soviet Union. I was born in Moscow, and I had very enthusiastic parents who pushed me in all sorts of different directions in sport, predominantly gymnastics, figure skating. You know, being in Russia, figure skating, big thing. I did a lot of cross country skiing with my family in a beautiful forest full of snow, which is a legacy now, because of the climate change. But subsequently, um, I started exploring the area of dance, and my mom thought that's a great idea to nudge me in the direction of classical ballet. And to cut a long story short, I trained 10 years in Moscow Ballet Academy and subsequently became a classical ballet dancer. And I started my classical ballet career in Moscow. And then that was the beginning. And in the end, I finished my classical ballet career with Scottish Ballet, that is still based in Glasgow. So because of different circumstances, different generation, we didn't have a dual career approach. And therefore, when I was a classical ballet dancer, I 100% committed my career to classical ballet. And therefore, by the end of the career, I didn't quite know what to do with myself. And in all wisdom, followed the footsteps of my great friend and went to university. And this gave me literally two things: to acquire a basic bachelor's degree, but also have a bit of a breather and understand what I wanted to do next. And subsequently, I came across the idea of a kind of mental training, and also the opportunities that the mental training creates for performers. Reflecting on my career, we didn't have anything like this. And therefore, my subsequent degree, and that is master's degree in Edinburgh University, I uh, completely focused on sports psychology. That gave me a great opportunity to combine my previous experience in performing arts and ballet with also new knowledge that sports psychology get involved with professional sports. And I started working with sports like rugby academy and also sports like hockey and also badminton. So that was my beginning working with Scottish Institutes of Sport. And as you correctly pointed out, subsequently, it has become my absolute calling, sports psychology. And now I had a small and yet robust and talented group of psychologists, young, very enthusiastic group that we work across at least 20 different sports, both leading towards on the path of Olympics, Paralympics, Commonwealth Games, and major games as well.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, great overview of your career then, and sort of, I guess for a lot of people that see a sports psychologist will think that they've maybe gone into it from a purely psychology route, or because they absolutely adore sport. But the performing arts is sort of a different avenue that's easy to forget about. But it's got so many similarities and things that are almost identical to sport. So it's really interesting. Just on that, was something as you spent sort of the 10 years when you were younger in these high quality and high pressure dance environments, was your sort of mental training and or lack of something that you constantly thought about and you were constantly questioning, like, why do I feel so much pressure? Or were you just like, that's how it is, that's how everyone feels? Or did you really feel like there was something lacking and you could improve on that?
Yes, I think that good question, by the way. I think that when you are in the environment, you know, this expression that you can't see the forest because of trees. And that was my experience. So I was in the environment where everyone struggled in a similar type of way, and everyone was working out through their limitations, physical limitations, challenges, mental challenges, in the same type of way. And if you are tougher, you do it slightly bit better. If you are not so tough,
Mm-hmm.
you know, hey ho, there is a row, a queue of dancers that are desperate to take your place. So the competition itself, in ballet world and in performing arts is very rife. It's very powerful driver, slightly different to elite sports as well, but nevertheless, it's still there. Only after the end of my ballet career, I managed to take a step to one side, as I mentioned to you, go to university and have a breather. And this gave me a very, very good perspective and awareness of what kind of intelligence, what kind of knowledge, what type of expertise exists outside of this. I don't want to speak disrespectfully, but almost like a pot of
Mm-hmm.
of ballet world, if you like, or performing
Yeah.
arts world that I was right in the center of. And also only the external perspective allowed me to see the opportunities that a lot of people apply, a lot of people work with in elite sports day to day. And that was my beginning. I definitely wanted to acquire this knowledge, these skills, as you go through the pathway of becoming sports psychologist. It's supervised experience for 3 years, which I did, and this gave me even deeper awareness how these skills that are developed in the sports psychology, in the world of psychology in general, can be transferred to performing arts and sports as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think it's a good point that in sport, a lot of people can often get sucked into sort of their roots and their sort of home, where they come from, how they've been taught it, and they do the same things all the time. But I think it's really important, just the example you give, that you sort of put yourself out into new experiences, you learn from other people and put yourself in different environments, because you can then see and approach your own environment in a different way, these different perspectives. I think it's really important.
I think so, yeah.
Um, yeah, good stuff. Um, Sort of moving on, I guess, to more of your job now. If you could give in sort of like a shortest amount possible, even a sentence, what is your role as a sports psychologist?
So my role as a sports psychologist, I had leads rather small team of psychologists. So my job is to make sure that the sports that Sport Scotland provides support for are the needs are addressed. So the resources that we have, the small these resources are distributed equally between the sports. It is my responsibility to make sure that my colleagues who are enthusiasts and very passionate people are not drowning in just the volume of work, and they are developing and growing appropriately within their sphere and their capacity. My job is also to make sure that they develop the set of skills that they're interested in. So that is the managerial sports psychology side that is perhaps not so obvious and apparent. Perhaps for your listeners, I would like to just to reiterate what I do as sports psychologist, because even though I manage a small team of psychologists, I also deliver sports psychology. I'll give you one example. I'm sure the people would not mind me speaking about one sport and group of individuals I'm working with currently. It's a women's rugby national team. So, as an example of this team, I can say to you that so they're multi-layered. approach. First of all, I work with athletes directly, so I sit down with them on one-to-one. I get to know them. I don't use any questionnaires because I think that this kind of distance me from my clients. But I ask all sorts of different questions and I get to know them as people, not only as performers, but as people, because my philosophy that it is people who perform rather than it's performers who execute a certain set of skills based on their talent. So get to know them as people, and then we look at individuals as people and therefore help them to perhaps make emphasis on the skills they already have and purify them and clear them and apply them appropriately to achieve their optimum performance. Second level is, of course, I work with the support staff. For example, chat all the time with physios, chat all the time with doctors, chat all the time with managers, and also coaches, support coaches, head coach, etc. Just to get more awareness of information, how people are performing, because what they disclose, for example, on physio table, could be quite insightful, obviously with the respect of confidentiality to the person, etc. And work with coaches for me is paramount because they are spearheading the support. They're connecting, communicating with athletes all the time. And I think that the quality of their communication is absolutely essential, how people engage, communicate within the team, between each other, but also with coaches as well. And I think that less we create frustration and misunderstandings between the coaching team and the players, we as a team, and the players specifically have more clear perspective on their goals, and they're able to achieve their goals and drive toward their goals without other bits, if you like, of discomfort, unhappinesses, and so forth. So my work with coaches is absolutely essential too.
Yeah, good stuff. I think sort of the word you could describe as what you're trying to do is be integrated into the whole setup of a performance athlete.
Absolutely
So
spot on.
just like there's no point having a physio to tell someone that they need to do certain exercises or rest if a coach is then going to say, no, you need to come out and do this hard contact session, for the example of rugby. So
Yeah,
there's no point you doing all this work with an individual and then the coach just ignoring that when it comes to a field. So having that idea of your approach being a very sort of human first one is
correct.
is is interesting. There's obviously different sports psychologists going to have different approaches. Everyone's pathway is different. You've described your approach as that. What have you got sort of a word or a way you would describe it? And what are some of the other approaches that sports psychologists can take?
Yeah, I think that yes, very important. This point is very important for sports psychologists. I think that at the beginning of my career, this conversation about what are the modules, what are the tools that you use in your approach, and I remember being very proud when I came across cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral approach, and cognitive approach, and I get all excited and passionate about the opportunities that all these approaches create and see definite advantages in them. So therefore, what I can say to you, I don't really kind of dismiss any kind of philosophical grounding and every in any kind of psychological tools that are used in cognitive behavioral, cognitive approach, etc., or behavioral approach for that matter. Um, there are certain waves, the mindfulness is now called the third wave of kind of psychological philosophy that becomes gradually more popular among sports psychologists. So I'll give you an example why I think it is so incredibly powerful. Now, I delivered some years ago a TED talk after me visiting the Olympic Games, working with the Olympic team. And the point I made there is the same, the point I can make just now, is that in cognitive behavioral approach, you have awareness of cognitions that are unhelpful. For example, negative self-talk is not helpful, positive self-talk is helpful. So my job as a sports psychologist to first of all raise awareness, okay, identify unhelpful and help them to build bridges, how to cross, for example, from negative to positive. And also, when they slide back to negative, say, right, okay, what we do, the same thing, is that we constantly cross this bridge to kind of positive bank of self-talk, if I may call it like this. And what happens, what I notice is that when the athletes, at the elite level, a lot of them have very powerful characteristic, and that is perfectionism. And when they try this kind of yanking themselves from the negative bank to positive bank, and they do it all the time, they become very frustrated because, they start battling against themselves. They know that negative self-talk is not helpful, positive self-talk is helpful, and they keep dragging themselves from one state of mind to another state of mind. And a lot of the time they're unsuccessful because the pressures are still there. These, if they are, for example, at the beginning of this journey is annoyingly repetitive. And what I noticed that a lot of athletes get tired, frustrated, and angry with themselves. That means that knowing what is right, not being sophisticated enough, experienced enough how to do it in a kind of helpful way, athletes create two battles at the same time. If you're a rugby player, you can see the opposition and they run towards you, and your job to tackle them, okay, and turn over the ball. You can see the opposition, you know what needs to be done. But with all these mental battles that are going on in their mind, you almost create like a guerrilla war, like a second front. So they battle against themselves. They know what is right, what is wrong. They're trying to drag themselves from not helpful to helpful, and also at the same time battle the opposition. In individual sports like swimming, there's nobody tackles you to the ground, so therefore this becomes even more potentially, not always, but sometimes this becomes quite an important little battle of wills. I know what is positive, I can't get there. I know that is negative, and it just keeps going round and round. Based on that, I kind of came across the idea of mindfulness, where perhaps the most important element, and that is acceptance. So therefore, you completely learn and study how to be peaceful, respectful towards yourself, and not necessarily yanking yourself, not dragging yourself, not necessarily dividing and ripping yourself apart, what is negative, what is positive, but seeing yourself as a whole. Sometimes I have positive thoughts, sometimes I have negative thoughts, and also having the wisdom and having the skills to pay attention to these thoughts, okay, and just be present, not necessarily changing them, because as you know, the thoughts and the feelings are transient. It means that they change anyway, they pass anyway, unless you have this phenomenon called rumination, that they go round and round and round. But naturally the thoughts have beginning, middle, and the end, okay, and your job is just to observe them and just be present and say, I have these thoughts, or I have these thoughts, and that's okay, because I still can do my job. I still can go forward with negative thoughts, with positive thoughts, and do my job. Tackle the person to the ground, swim as fast as I can, with positivity, with negativity, and therefore you clear the debris of your, like, what is right and what is wrong, Yeah, and just bring all your resources towards the job that you do in this moment of time. So that is the philosophy. This is my philosophical grounding, and this perhaps just one of the examples why I think it is important, and where mindfulness gives you an advantage in relation to other philosophical stands.
Yeah, excellent, good stuff. I think it reminds me a wee bit. I'm not sure if you've read the book called Legacy, but it talks about sort of how the All Blacks worked with these sort of mental skills and this idea of these positive and negative thoughts. And I think you can come away from this sort of idea the first time of hearing about it thinking you do things like mindfulness, you work on new skills, and you can play, for example, an 80-minute rugby match thinking positively, happily, and perfectly the whole time and never have any of these thoughts when that's clearly not the case.
Yeah.
It's about when you go into these moments of negativity, how you handle that, how you deal with it, and how you either get yourself back into these positive thoughts or you just continue with your job and it doesn't affect your game. So I think understanding that you can't control every single thought. It's just about how you manage them, and that's where the real success is.
Spot on. Absolutely spot on.
How I think one of the things in especially in psychology, having done 2 years of studying it and sort of learning about it, especially in a sport context, psychology can be really difficult to sort of quantify when success happens and sort of make it a proof that look, we've had success here. And for athletes or for a sports psychologist, that might be difficult. How do you go about sort of quantifying success, knowing if you're making progress with an athlete or if you maybe need to change what you're doing or how you're doing it?
Yes. So very important area of awareness for psychologists. Now, I would start with this. So there is a group of sports psychologists who are university based. Okay. Their job is to educate young generation of future sports psychologists, students, but also their job is to run research and publish. So in loads of scientific publications, obviously you have an idea of the element that you're testing and the effect that you have. If you don't have an effect, it's also a result. So with sports psychology on professional level, on elite level, as I mentioned earlier, I don't run any questionnaires at all. Okay. So what I do is that I go to the players and say, right, okay, was it helpful? If they tell me that it wasn't helpful, I trust them. Okay. And we make changes, amendments, make different emphasis, or perhaps I just use different language or give them a gentle nudge towards the sources of information that is explained, describe it better than me. With sports psychology, the spearhead of sports psychology, I would say, is your performance. The categories and the ideas that fascinate me still after so many years. So what comprises an optimum performance? An optimum performance, personally for me, is the holy grail, is the most important thing for athletes. To achieve the optimum performance consistently, or achieve the optimum performance at specific competitions, okay, that matter, that will give them qualification for Olympic Games or other key competitions, or at these competitions. So therefore, I sit down with athletes and we reflect on their recollections and their awareness of what is it exactly that makes their performance at their optimum, at their best. Okay, and what they're basically saying, much of a muchness in all sports, is what I probably pronounce this name incorrectly, but Yuri Hanin, optimum zone of optimum functioning, or individual zone of optimum functioning, or Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, I think that that's a Hungarian name, and sorry if I pronounce it incorrectly, who was talking about the state of flow. Okay, so we can have a look at these two elements and these two parameters and say optimum performance, what it is like, what are the components, okay? And a lot of athletes would say the state of flow. Even in sports like your sport, rugby, okay, a lot of athletes would say, do you know what, unless I see and I watch the match that I played in, right, I have a few memories of what actually happened because I was in this state of mind that is so incredibly beautifully described as a zone of optimum functioning and state of flow, where the awareness and recognition and cognition in generally kind of decreases, but your awareness and clarity increases. So we kind of clarify specific elements between myself and the athletes. Okay, what is it for them the optimum level of performance? We define certain state of mind and characteristics that will enable them to come closer to this state of mind. For example, feeling more relaxed is more likely of getting me a little bit closer to the state of my optimum performance, or feeling kind of clarity about my job. So if this means I'm going to ask the coach this inverted commas stupid question once again, just to make sure that I understand, is something that I strongly recommend players to do, etc. So we create this objective picture for one individual. What is it about this optimum performance? What are the characteristics? What are the qualities? And therefore, we create this as a benchmark, and we constantly refer to this benchmark as did you or did you not manage to achieve that? Not necessarily the state of flow itself, because it's enigma for me still, but come close. Does these qualities, does these characteristics help you to get as close as possible to this state of mind? If yes, my job has been successful and I achieved that. If not, I find different ways of nudging and helping athletes to get to state of flow, zone of optimum functioning as close as possible.
Nice one. I think just 2 points on that. So when you talk about state of flow, this idea of just sort of like you're doing things almost without thinking, I think it's important that we recognize it's incredibly difficult to get to, as sort of you alluded to. Like there's the example of Dan Carteret, possibly the greatest fly half in rugby ever. And there's only sort of one game he refers to where he gets to this level of state of flow, and I think it was 2005 British and Irish Lions tour, maybe the second test or something like that. And sort of this idea that the greatest ever player might have only hit that once during his career, so this level is so high. But as well, I think having these benchmarks is a really good and interesting way of putting it, because if you put it in the sort of context of maybe an S&C coach, they're going to have these targets for players to hit, these physical targets, whether it's sort of like a Bronco time or how much they're able to bench in the gym. If you're hitting these points, then that's sort of what we'd expect for your position, for your weight. If you can hit these, then we think you'll be in sort of your optimal area to perform at your best level. So if that's your sort of physical goals, your physical benchmarks, then here you go. Here's your structure to hit these mental benchmarks. And if you're hitting these, hopefully we're unlocking that sort of optimal mental performance. So yeah, it can seem sort of very, I think for people on the outside, or for me learning about it at the start, it can seem really complex about, right, we've got these ideas and skills about how to improve players, but how do we know that we can actually do it? But I think having these benchmarks is a good way of showing that.
Absolutely. And I think that in psychology, it's not easy. Again, as I mentioned from the very beginning, the academic sports psychology, people in university, this is just bread and butter in terms of establishing the characteristics that are tested, and also constantly refer to statistical analysis and the effect on this particular variable, etc. In applied sports psychology with elite athletes, it's not so straightforward because you are not testing them. They are not they're your clients, absolutely, but they're not the group that you're testing your theory. I would not even dream of doing that. These are the group of individuals for whom my job is to give them an opportunity to understand better themselves and therefore use this knowledge towards unveiling the potential that is sitting within them. Whether these potential is different in every individual. I was speaking with one triathlon athlete yesterday, and I asked her to write, what unsettles her fears. She came up with 3 pages. 3 pages of the stuff that unsettles her. 3 pages of detailed awareness that gives her a fright, and etc. So we categorize them, we address them, we kind of help her to turn towards these particular fears, and so this is just individual work. This is the work that has to be creative from my point of view. This and unique for one individual player. This perhaps would not be appropriate for the rest of the clients that I work with, but for her, that was very, very important piece of work. So therefore, these type of opportunity to really trust your client. What is important for her becomes important for me. Okay, and also being able to kind of step away from my arrogant kind of state of mind of I know it all. I've been in this business for 17 years and then for 20 years in kind of being a performer. All of this to one side and say, right, okay, the person is in front of me. This person has her own fears, hopes, and unique individual characteristics. And my job is to help them to settle down, look in the eye of the fear, unveil the potential, and transfer and apply their potential towards achieving their goals.
Just sort of coming back to, I guess, the mindfulness stuff, because I know that's sort of where you've got a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge on it. What is your way of approaching it with athletes? So if you were to, say, get a new athlete, triathlete, for example, another one, and you thought that mindfulness might be the way to go, how would you go about? What are your sort of steps and process to get to that point?
Oddly enough, I start with good old stoicism. Because the stoicism, in my opinion, gives you clarity. In stoicism, you know exactly where you stand with no gray area. For example, with majority of athletes, a good proportion of athletes, the first thing I probably do is to sit down with them and talk about the things that they cannot control in their sport. The elements that are fundamentally important, and yet they are outside of their control. The second part of this exercise will look at the elements that they can control, all right, and also have awareness. And there's a clear divide between what you can and cannot control. What a lot of the time surprises the athletes, that outcome is not in their control. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they are not jumping on this idea that outcome of a match, performance, test, match, selection, etc., is not outside of their control, is because they put their heart and soul, years of training and commitment and focus and dieting and punishing training sessions in gym towards this. And yet when you put the cold, brutal fact that forget about it, forget about the outcome because you cannot control it. So therefore, you're wasting your time. That is a massive alarm bell for majority of athletes. Now, this is stoicism. Now, we look a little bit further, and that is the bridge towards mindfulness. So we look a little bit further and we say, right, okay, past, present, and the future. That is our experience, what you can and cannot control. They say, okay, that's a little bit clearer because it's past and the future, we cannot control that. And the selection or the winning or otherwise, okay, is in the future. So therefore, we cannot control that. So what we can control is the present moment. Okay, and I say, okay, and that is the link to mindfulness. So let's really do all we can with the present moment and leave the thoughts that unsettle you, and yet they're so incredibly seductive. You know it yourself. Incredibly
Yeah.
seductive thoughts in terms of the emotional investment. Will I, or will we, or will we not win a match? For example, I ask, your sport is rugby. I ask rugby players, can you win a rugby match? Did I ask you this question before?
Yeah, yeah, you've asked me this before, and
What
I
did you say?
answered sort of. I said yes first time. I said yes. I was like, yeah, I can do that. And then I remember you going to me, no, you can't.
I ask you again, can you win a rugby match?
Nope.
And now you're saying to me no, yeah, with little bit of reflection. And yet this thought is,
Yeah.
it's like a dog with a bone, and I'm trying to rip this bone away from you and saying, leave it,
Yeah.
leave it, because what happens that you are jumping ahead of yourself to something that you have no control over. I also ask, for example, our players, look at the scoreboard during the match, even look at the scoreboard. Can you control it? Can you control the scoreboard? Even
No.
if you're a kicker, you cannot control the scoreboard. Leave it. And therefore, shift your focus into here and now. And that is the part of the mindfulness that is absolutely at the center of your ability to focus on what is happening in these moments of time. But this requires a lot of practice away from the pitch, away from the park, away from the gym, away from other elements that you kind of train and practice to be a rugby player, because you have to do it, as we say in Ballet terminology, in the wings. Before you go on the stage, this work has to be done. Because if, for example, in order for rugby players, sorry, we kind of keep talking about rugby, but
It's
we can
okay.
talk about any other sports. If you go to the gym, right, or if you already are on the pitch, it's too late. You cannot practice your psychological skills. You can use what you already have. Same as a match physically. You cannot improve your physical ability or technical ability when you're in the match. You just use what you have. So therefore, as far as psychological skills are concerned, as far as your ability to stay in the present moment is concerned, practice when you have your cup of tea in the morning. Feel the warmth, smell it, stay in the moment,
Yeah.
connect with whatever experiences you have in the moment, good, bad, and indifferent. Be a little bit more or significantly more non-judgmental. Yeah. So therefore, and that is an interesting thing, George. I really believe in it. And a lot of athletes would agree with me, because these are universal and fundamental skills that enable people to connect with themselves irrespective of their job titles.
Yeah.
If you're a swimmer, if you're a triathlon athlete, etc., 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 first of all, you're a human being. Can you connect deeply, profoundly, in a meaningful way what it does actually mean to be a human? I was speaking with a tremendous cyclist very recently, and he said, I had a massive crash and I'm going back into kind of the fitness and performance now, but I'm questioning, why am I doing cycling? Why am I choosing this incredibly difficult sport and a track cyclist, sprinter, big lad.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, what's interesting about it, watch the film called Searching for Greatness. Wayne Gretzky, tremendous hockey player. So he was asked, did hockey make you the man that you are? And he said, no. The hockey helped me to unveil the person that I am. Unveil the person that I am. And I think that's what I said to this young cyclist. Don't ask from your sport what the sport cannot offer. The sport cannot offer the meaning, but the sport at the elite level or otherwise can offer you an opportunity to really learn who you are and what kind of person you are, what you're capable of. They take so much pain, and very frequently in cycling and swimming, for example, okay, the person who is able to take more pain usually is more successful. Okay, so therefore, it is about learning how much pain I can take, both in training, punishing training sessions, and also the races. That's the opportunity that the sport at every level gives you to understand, who am I? What can I do? What qualities I have? Not necessarily the meaning. The meaning is not within the sport. The meaning is within us. And therefore, the mindfulness, in my opinion, gives athletes an opportunity to kind of go down a couple of layers with awareness, with acceptance, to dig deeper down, connect with who you truly are, unveil your potential, and transfer and really express yourself on the pitch, in the water, or on the track.
I think the word you sort of ended it with there is about expressing yourself is sort of it at the end of the day. Whether you're a high level athlete performer or you play grassroots sport on a Saturday morning, you're doing it's the same way of expressing yourself. It's who you are, and you're getting to show off what you work on during the week, what you've spent years doing. And I think when we're looking at mindfulness as well, like, it's not something that is completely unattainable, and you need to be a specific sort of person, or you need to have a specific support network, or be in a certain environment to achieve it. As you said, like, whether you're playing an international at Murrayfield or down at your local rugby club, you can't affect the scoreboard. You can't win the game by yourself. Those things are both the same in both settings. And then both professional athletes and grassroots players are going to have a cup of tea in the morning, have got this opportunity to just think and be mindful and be present. So I think it's something, whether you're an athlete, or just a person that plays sport, maybe you don't even consider yourself an athlete or a coach, but these things can be achieved through simple steps. But it's putting those processes in place and giving people that opportunity and that awareness that they can do it. And I think as well, what you said about process and outcome, it's a thing as a coach I try to like express, because too often you can make a decision. So for example, in rugby, if it was to kick or pass or run in the moment, you make a decision, and it's so easy to see what the outcome was and say if it was a bad decision or good decision. When in reality, you've got to assess what was the decision made at that point, without the hindsight, without what happened after. And I think coaches especially need to be aware that let's allow, people to make mistakes, people to things to go wrong, but is the decision wrong, or was it just the outcome? So look at the process, look at how you do it. Do you think grassroots sports can start using and enhancing sports psychology a bit better in what they do? For example, a lot of grassroots teams will have very well educated coaches that have got experience, got access to S&C coaches to develop their physical. They'll have great physios that help support that as well. Athletes, or from sort of a grassroots point of view, also have access to a lot of information about nutrition and how to keep their bodies well and how to technically and tactically perform well. But this sort of mental side of the game feels like there's almost something lacking. Do you think that can change, and sort of how could you see that changing if you do?
Yeah. Psychologists usually say in order to predict the future behavior, assess the past behavior. So the past behavior says that in 20 years away, 40 years away, sports psychology was not used as widely and as deeply as it is now. So it is very likely that sports psychology will become bigger and bigger factor in elite sports, grassroots sports. As you and listeners, viewers perhaps will know, that there is a tremendous momentum building up in terms of awareness of mental health and mental well-being in general. So therefore, what you and I are talking about is tip of the iceberg, just tiny, tiny tip of the iceberg. You know, how many players are in a national team? You know, handful. How many players, how many individuals are involved in national rugby, both on women's and men's side? Tiny, tiny proportion of general population. But, you know, the truth of the matter is that we now have much more awareness of psychology in general. We now have much more awareness of what psychology can do. We have much less fear of these unknown abracadabra psychologist type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we now understand a little bit better of what unveiling the potential with the help and the nudge of psychologists who are, in my opinion, is their responsibility to delegate all these skills and opportunities to look after them, kind of athletes themselves, and put these powerful tools in their own hands, what this can bring. So therefore, I would say for sports psychology, the future is bright. And I think that, like your good self, the coaches will go from the kind of elite levels and they bring their sport to the grassroots levels. They now understand and recognize the fact that, you know, they cannot be jacks of all trades. You cannot be S&C coach as a rugby coach. You cannot be nutritional coach, even though you have some knowledge. But
Yeah.
why on earth, you know, if you want to get the best out of your players on any level, why on earth do you want to give them advice on all of these very sophisticated areas of knowledge? Bring the specialist, you know, and if the specialists as sports psychologists are available, they will do so much better job than if you kind of scratch the surface. No disrespect to the coaches. If they have deep knowledge of technical, tactical awareness, if they have deep knowledge of understanding and breaking down the opposition and what they do, it doesn't necessarily mean that they become like super trooper nutritionists or lifestyle coaches or psychologists or performance analysis specialists or biomechanists. No. But now there is awareness of that these areas exist, including sports psychology. And I think that it requires special skills as the coach, has to be brave enough and to say, do you know what? I don't know everything about sports science. And I
Yeah.
think that, but I know people who do. This is bravery. And I think that there are more and more coaches of your age, slightly bit older than your age, who are open-minded and who are brave to say, I don't know everything. Like in rugby, for example, I see more and more coaches who are open-minded and who embrace this type of attitude. And I know some sports, and these sports will stay nameless, who are more conservative and resistant towards bringing sports psychologists on board. And this, in the end of the day, limits the potential of individuals, and perhaps even limits, not only from athletic point of view, but even from human point of view,
Yeah.
as we were talking about, limits their capabilities and skills to look after themselves. And we know in some sports that will stay nameless that there are a lot of individuals who go through very, very difficult times in terms of depression, in terms of addictions, etc., etc.
I think it's really nice. We've sort of come full circle where we've come back to that point where you talk about organizations, if they're open or if they're not, to introducing a sports psychologist. And I guess it's what we spoke about earlier, that you need to put yourself out of your own environment to learn about other environments and to see what you can bring in. And if you've got this sort of way of thinking of this is how it's always been done, this is how we'll keep doing it, then you're not going to change. You're not going to progress. Additionally, how you're saying about sort of, you're not just restricting that individual as a performer, as an athlete, but as a human as well. So that humanistic approach where you're just getting a person to sort of express themselves in their best possible way and understand who they are.
Exactly.
You're just limited. You're putting a barrier up to them doing that to their best potential. So yeah, I think it's really exciting to hear, really good to hear though that you believe that it's going to keep progressing, and it's sort of a top down approach. It will trickle down through sort of levels, and once that experience gets out and opportunities come out, then people are gonna sort of get to a point where they realize this is a really key part of performance. I think, like, I've met so many people and spoken to so many people, and I share my sort of passion for sports psychology, and they say, "Oh yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I think it's really important." And then there's nothing done about it in sort of their environment or their performance, and it's like, if you think it's important, if you think it's interesting, then why is it just like left aside? So hopefully we sort of see that to change.
Yeah, and I think that,
Sorry, anyway.
what is very important to also consider is that is the change itself is a difficult one, but also kind of, I don't use, for example, very often my, for example, institute kit. I do it deliberately. I don't really use white robe or a pipe and the round glasses, even though I have a bit of a beard. um, I think bringing the knowledge, breaking it down and putting it very, very simple terms and saying, you know what, if you simply break down your sports, sit down and think about it, what you can and cannot control, only this can help you. But then again, remember what I said at the very beginning. As a ballet dancer, I was in the pot of ballet world. And they were saying, do you know what? Would extra S&C help you? Oh, I. Would extra psychology help you? Oh, yes, absolutely. But you know what? The truth is, when it comes to 5, 6 o'clock, and we've been training, practicing from 10, 6 o'clock of hardly any stops, and then a performance in the evening, you cough your guts out and you go back in the pot
Yeah.
where you started from. Even though, look, all these ideas are fantastic, phenomenal, very seductive, but the people are in the pot. And therefore, they say, yeah, brilliant, but they go constantly back into in their world, and they just do minimum of what they're capable of. Just tell and show in a simple, clear terms, help the coach to understand what he can do, like in the afternoon, in the evening training session with players. What I used to do many years ago, I used to put the radio microphone on coaches and listen very intensely. What are they saying and how they're communicating? And therefore, my feedback would be very, very specific and very applied and very
Yeah.
simple, non-threatening. Do you know what I mean? It's not like
Yeah.
I'm here to undermine you as a coach at whatever level. And I think it is just knowledge and skills of sports psychologists to pitch the knowledge at the right level in the right way. Just make it simple. Go back to their level, whatever their level is, high or it doesn't really matter. Speak their language, learn, listen very intensely, and give them something that will whet their appetite. Simple, clear, supportive, positive, encouraging.
Amazing. I think, yeah, just 2 points you sort of said there. I think speaking their language is such a key thing, because even if you've had 20 odd years experience of high performance, and then you go to work with maybe a team at a grassroots level or something, their language is completely different. They
100%.
train 4 hours a week. They have to take their own kit to the game. They have to look after their own boots. They've got to sort of put all the posts on the pitch before the game. So there's a completely different sort of level, and I think speaking their language is a really key point. And as well, just, I mean, I guess a lesson for everyone is having that reflective idea for coaches, sports psychologists, that you're looking back at what you're doing, you're reflecting on how you've done it, what you can do differently, and how you're performing. Yeah. Final question, hopefully an easy one. If you were to say, anyone listening now, what is the one sort of psychological tip, idea, maybe it's something we've said before, but someone could include in their training, sort of whether it's before training, sort of in their own time, that could help benefit or support their mental performance?
This relates to what I said earlier. You cannot control the future, and you cannot change the past. The only thing that is worth paying attention to, and that is the present moment. If you are able to really be grateful to yourself, respectful to yourself, and say, if I can clear this debris of jumping ahead or being stuck too much in the past, being in the present moment, and connect and ground yourself with what you do in the present moment, this genuinely can help. And if we're talking about matches, for example, or even training sessions, if you are able to keep nudging yourself to stay in the present moment, irrespective of what you just did, constantly refocus on now, this moment. And then say to yourself, I'm not going to forget. I'm going to just delay the judgment. Let's go to the changing room. And you know what? Scream and shout, if that is the way to cope. Yeah? But not in the training session. In the training session, your job is to stay in the present moment. And your ability and the player's ability to return and here and now is a massive skill that will nudge them and help them to really get to what they're capable of doing, rather than their incredible ability to criticize themselves because it's a schoolboy error. Forget about it. Yeah? Let's do the schoolboy error assessment after the training session, after the match. And here in the match, in the training session, just in here and now, this moment, this tackle, this kick, this stroke, this kind of taking the corner if you're a cyclist, etc. And that is a massive skill on its own. Even if they do only one thing and they do it well, this on its own can have a tremendous potential of unveiling their talent and their potential.
Misha, thank you so much for your time, for your insight, and sort of for everything you've shared about your career, your thoughts, and sort of, I guess, the future as well of psychology. So thank you for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for your generous invitation. Thank you.